Thank you all for coming. For those who don't know me, I am Dami and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Black Employee Network. And today it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Leroy Logan as our guest speaker this evening. Dr. Leroy is a former superintendent in the Metropolitan Police and is also a former chair and founding member of the Black Police Association. He is a true inspiration and a respected and highly regarded commentator on policing and wider social justice issues. Described by The Guardian as the man who risked everything to fight racism in the police force from within, his contributions to the Metropolitan Police and wider policy work have been invaluable. In particular, through his involvement in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, the inquiry into the killing of Damilola Taylor, and the organisation of the London 2012 Olympics. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Leroy Logan.
Good evening. I like to keep them waiting, you know. I couldn't really hear the music back there, but it was great. Did you hear the music? You sure? Okay. Does anyone remember it? No, you won't remember this. This is when your parents used to be into this music. Okay. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I just want to thank HSF and the Black Employees Network and all their allies and guests for this, and obviously champions who asked me to speak at this event. And I want to go play your video. Before I do so, I just want to emphasize that I no longer have any police powers. However, I need to arrest your attention. Everyone says that. So that I'm able to stop and search your thinking. And I can then convict you in owning your own story that leads you to becoming your more authentic self. So I'll leave you with that. And then I'm going to play the video. How cool is that? It's pretty cool, isn't it? You know, do you ever wonder when you think, when is going to play me when I'm famous? I don't have that problem. And I also really understand the glory of the story and what that means in carving out a legacy for change and hopefully to inspire and to give people a sense of, well, he can do it, I can do it. And of course, it wouldn't happen unless I had a great lady actually in front of me, not alongside. The person that actually makes me what I am and who's with me today. You normally only get one Logan, but you got two for the price of one. And that's Greta Logan, my wife. Stand up, darling. She wouldn't leave me out of her sight today because it's our 41st wedding anniversary. Okay. So no, and she gave me permission to be able to join you today. And yeah, it's that's the story I'm talking about. And it's not just about your careers and the relationships you have amongst yourselves, but it's also about how you build those relationships with your family and your friends, which are really important. Sometimes you can be very focused on the job, which I was guilty of. If it wasn't for Gretel's heavy lifting, I wouldn't really be standing in front of you. So I know the importance of teamwork and partnership, but please don't confine it to just your work environment. It's beyond that. And we're blessed with three very adult children and 3 primary school age grandchildren. And I know how important that is in carving the way our story has developed. And it's still ongoing, so it hasn't stopped. When Steve McQueen approached me about the book, I thought to myself, what does he really see in it? As you can see from the video, my calling was actually against my sense of loyalty to my father, because as you can see, that wasn't drama. My father was badly beaten up by officers over a traffic matter as I was in the application process for the police. And I must admit, I was questioning my sanity that, really, should I pursue this? And sometimes your worst nightmare can be your biggest breakthrough. Because if I hadn't had the support of Gretel and one of my best friends, Lee John of Imagination, anyone? Yeah. His mother, Jessie Stevens, is an amazing woman. She's still 97 years young. She's the one that taught me to be joining the police, and because she was already a community liaison officer. So having someone in the organization gave me that lens in which to say, well, actually, what am I really getting myself into? And so I knew I was leaving a great life of science, because that's where I was going. That's my pathway. And then all of a sudden, policing caught me on the blind side. And they made a film out the first few years in policing. Now, the film's great. Got BAFTAs. In fact, John Boyega got the Golden Globe. And I still haven't seen it. That's the really annoying thing. One day I'll catch up with him in LA somewhere or something. But those sort of things actually make it so important to break barriers. So how often would a police officer have a chance to speak to corporate lawyers? If it wasn't for the film, if it wasn't for the breakthrough of the book, really, I don't think many of you would have given me the time of day. Possibly. But you're here now, you're a captive audience, so you've just got yourself to blame. Right, now, I wonder how many people were concentrating. So, I have a copy of my book, and I've got a little quiz for you. So what's the word that links the film, my story, and of course, the music? Did anyone hear the title of the song? No? Want to play again? There's a PA system there. No? They've gone? All right. No one heard the words. Did he go that far? Okay. That's blown my quiz. Very good. Who said that first? Come up here. I order you. No, I'm joking. Sorry, my narcissistic policing ways came out there. Okay, that's very good. Well, you win. Give her a round of applause for winning. So afterwards, come and see me, sign it for you. Okay. And so really, it's quite obvious, isn't it? The track's called Feel the Force. And I was in the Force. That's my story. And John Boyega was in Star Wars, and you have to... very good. What's your name? Liz. Well done, Liz. I hope to see you later. So that's why I wanted to convict your attention to detail. But the film actually delves into how I navigate that system with a really deep-rooted culture. And, of course, the personal sacrifices that it took. Sometimes when you're going into a culture you're not fully clear on, you believe you have to strip yourself of your values to assimilate. And sometimes that can be dehumanizing. I realized from the beginning, especially with the trauma that I suffered with my father being beaten up, and even as a young man growing up in London, subject to the sus law, and we used to call them the police, the thought police, because they could read our minds, because they could arrest us on suspicion that we're about to commit an arrestable offence. So they must be thinking, they must be reading our minds, right? Unfortunately, that was the case for many people, and they were criminalised by it. But the good thing is I was willing to put that alongside, see what the vision was, and I was there to make changes from within. Did anyone actually see the film? Hands. Yep. If you haven't seen it, it's still on iPlayer. It should have stopped 3 years ago, but they keep it going, so it must be getting some views from somewhere. I watch it at least 10 times a night, you know. I'm joking. No, but in all honesty, it was so great to have that story, just reminding people that even though it's your worst nightmare, it can be your biggest breakthrough. And that's the first line of my book. And I just, as I said, I didn't want to strip off my values. I had to be who I am. And it's doing that, the story developed. And I saw that I was bringing in my beliefs and values. And as I said, the glory is in the story of how I was able to work with so many other people with a similar experience on how they wanted to make change from within. And fortunately, we were able to withstand a lot of the casual racism as it was then, the N word, the W word, the P word, you name it. There's so much sexism, so many things that you believe, gosh, could never happen now. I suppose not, but we still hear these horror stories. You know, the worst case scenario is Sarah Everard and what happened to her, being kidnapped, raped, and murdered by a serving officer. So we can't be complacent. We can't say, oh, those were the days. It can emerge if we don't allow it individually and as an organization, in your teams, in your units. So we have to understand that when we go in with our experiences, with our values, we have to be open to getting that great fit with your organization. Not expensive who you are. And that's what I said about the story. Know your story from the beginning. I wish I did really know it. But after a time, I got to understand what my role was and how I had to speak up. And why was that? Why did I have to speak up? Because I remember the union at the time, the Police Federation, would say, oh, but we've already got a union. We don't need, black officers to speak for themselves. But there was such a toxic environment that we couldn't leave it to the majority culture male and those who are quite insensitive in how they spoke. And they didn't celebrate diversity and they didn't really understand it. It wasn't in their little world. So we had to get into their world and widen it for them. Some of them would push back, but in the end, they had to have that conversation. And they were difficult conversations. And I'm sure you're still having difficult conversations because that is part of life. That's part of the change. That's part of the things that you need. And I just remember that very strong corporate identity that Met has had for almost 200 years. In 1827, when they started the Met Police, They were set to help the haves, protect the haves from the have-nots. So that gave a very strong corporate identity. You'll know you have your individual force, the city police. They are very clear on their little square mile, as it were. Very strong corporate identity. Remember, policing is a bit of a monopoly. It's not like they're competing for clients. The clients are not falling over themselves to get into our cells, but we have to be as proactive as possible. And in that corporate identity, or that very strong corporate culture, is it at the expense of embracing your change, your difference, your learning? Is it really allowed to challenge? Because if it isn't, there is normally an inherent erosion of those checks and balances within the organization that will allow people to speak out and be heard. Sometimes your corporate identity can stifle people, even though we're attracted to it in the first place. And of course, they will say, well, you've got to be a team player. Yeah, you've got to be a team player, but you're an individual and you're going to bring value to that team. And we all have different pathways, different stories. And that's one of the reasons why we realized we had to set up our own voice. And I know a lot of my colleagues still think it was a betrayal to set up the Black Police Association in 1994. And why would you do that publicly? You could do it behind closed doors. But no, we had to say it for the community. We had to ensure that we weren't just self-serving for our own members, but also had an external service delivery to the community. Because we realize there's an inextricable link between how you serve the needs of your diverse personnel and how you're better equipped to serve the needs of your diverse public. That inextricable link still stands today, even though we're in a communication revolution compared to the early 90s. And it's so important that you don't take these quite simple things for granted. We've got to be understanding of each other. We've got to be, I would say, sensitive to each other. Now, when you say those sort of things in the police, they think, oh, you're weak-willed, you're not cut out for this. And I used to get criticized as a graduate, oh, you don't know what you're doing. So you had to make sure, well, I did, that I was just as operationally strong as them, as well as strategically changing the organization. So I could chase the suspects just like everyone else. Some of you might know in the film when John Boyega's chasing the suspect through the that warehouse area, and you have to do the diving bit. You have to do some flying around somewhere. I had those sort of things. I had calling out for backup. I never got backup. But I didn't actually patrol with many officers. I patrolled on my own. Maybe because I started out in Islington, where I grew up. Any gooners in the house? You're feeling my pain? Thank you, Tottenham supporters, for what you did to us last week. Anyway. But no, Islington was a good opportunity for me to strengthen myself, my resolve. I had to be strong. I had to be bold. I had to know what I was about. But as I said, with the backing of my family and good friends. And what was really important for me was my faith as a Christian. For me, it was an attribute. It was an assistance. A lot of people say, well, how can you be a police officer and a person of faith? Well, actually, I found it very easy. I realized I had to be understanding of people. I know right from wrong. I've got a reference book that tells me what's right and wrong. And I know the importance of showing people that you're not conforming to their rules and regulations, not to be subordinate or what's the word? Disobeying my orders, let's say. No, I left the organization with 30 years exemplary service. I never was investigated for anything significant. I was trumped up charge against me. Okay, I was found to be totally innocent of that. And the organization had to compensate me in 6 figures. But even though I was more concerned about my relationships with the community, the people we serve, and my team knowing, as it says in my reference book, I had to be salt and light. I had to be setting an example. But you can't always do that. I know it's easier said than done. I know it's whether you're faith or no faith, you need to have your benchmark. What's going to keep you strong, especially when you get the challenges, especially when people are really trying to get into your head. And you know, one of the things, that's not a bad thing when people are trying to get into your head, but make sure what's occupying it in the first place is not going to be taken over by it. And why I say that, because I know how a corporate culture can have a very strong influence, and even how you think. Because when you go into an organization all those years, you got there on your own steam, right? With your family and everything. So the corporation shouldn't take over from you. It should add value if it's in the right direction, and you add value in return. So you want to have that environment where people feel a sense of belonging and get a sense of they can speak out and be heard and not seen as an adversary. I, unfortunately, was seen as adversary because I set up the Black Police Association 94 in London, and then the National Black Police Association in 98. And I was founder member of both and past chair. So I was seen to be a real challenge for some people. And some people still don't actually value what I did. They'll say, you did nothing, you disrupted, you're disloyal. Well, actually, I don't mind. I don't mind you criticizing me. You might not like me, but there's one thing they will really acknowledge is that I am consistent. And I am not going to compromise my focus on what I need to do for the organization, even now. Because I'm still seen as public enemy number one, because I gave evidence at the Macpherson inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence. And I was one of the officers who said that the Met Police was institutionally racist. So you can imagine some people were really upset with me. And I actually occupy a lot of people's headspace because of that. Even now, I get it in the neck. Go on my X account, or Twitter as it used to be, you will see the trolls are on me like a rash, which means for me, I'm doing something right. But you have to go with the flow, as it were, and not let it get into your spirit or let it get into your thinking of who you believe, what their motives are and how they're going to try and undermine you. I think the attention is good or bad attention, as long as they don't come into my space with that negativity. I think it's really important that we really embrace difference. And even if they don't agree with you, you can have good conversations. talking about good conversations, I was at Oxford University on Thursday, and the proposal for this debate I was attending was, is the police serving the public? Now, you would think I was saying, no, I was against that proposal, that the police is not serving the public. But I did speak to say I don't think the police are serving the public, because I cannot see how they are serving all of the public. I see them serving some of the public. And it means that when you are taking on your organization and leading it, are you serving the needs of all of your clients, regardless of their background and their culture? I think it's really important. And if an organization doesn't take into account all the available information internally from their diverse personnel through the public, then they're more likely to make mistakes, especially on service delivery. And the whole client experience can be an oversight or feeling dismissed at worst, and it can be disastrous at worst. It can be such a wide spectrum, but you want consistency. You want to be seen at top of your game all the time. So you have to accept what people are saying to you. So that's why the senior leadership is really important in all this. I hear so many times that it's an open door policy. But if some people can't even get into the corridor, how are they going to get to the door? So then people have to feel that there's a channel in which they can follow through to the door, speak to the senior leaders, and feel a sense of confidence in putting across their views. And that's one of the reasons why I really welcome the Black Employees Network, because I can identify with their stance. I've looked at their 10 points of action. And they're very, very similar to our constitution in the BPA 30 years ago. It's quite amazing how things have not really changed. The human condition hasn't changed, has it? We're still more or less the same beings, although we do things differently, different forms of communicating, forms of travel. But the issues are still the same. And that's why when I looked at what you're doing in the BEN, I saw great allyship. And that's why I really welcome the cross-section of people that are here, and how you're doing it together and not taking things for granted. Because you can't allow yourself the luxury of thinking that everything's well. You've got to feel a sense of, can we do better? How can we do better? But above all, if there's anything from my experience, do not allow it just to be transactional. It's not just about an algorithm. It's not just about a spreadsheet or a laptop. It's around the relationships and collaborating. So important. And I wouldn't want anyone to think that having a network is the be-all and end-all. It's just a start. Because I know the jewel in the crown for me is not the rank I got to, or even setting up the BPA. It's actually setting up a youth program called Voyage Youth. It's actually based in Hackney, not very far from here. Voyage stands for the Voice of the Youth and General Empowerment. And we help young people at year 9 to get a BTEC level 2. So they get UCAS points before they start their GCSEs in year 10. And so we help them to know their rights and responsibilities, how they can change their environment and not become a victim of it, especially with these issues around knife crime and mental health and drugs. It's so important that we are there for them with that cultural competence. And I know organizations have a corporate social responsibility, and they do work with charities. So as one of the founder members of Voyage Youth, and I'm still a patron, I want to, I'm going to make a big plug for them. So if anyone wants to work with them, they're literally a mile away in Shoreditch. And they're doing some amazing things. And that's the importance. It's great to get all of that energy and drive and determination and boldness and strength in what you're doing for your clients, whether it's over here or anywhere in the world. But also think of just down the road. It's like, I call it the tale of two cities, where our young people who see these skyscrapers, I can't even think that at some stage they might be able to walk in that building and not being challenged, but just walking in there. And they might be able to come up the escalator and have an office. And they might be able to go into the senior leadership area. Or they might be able to be the chairman or woman. That's the thing I'm trying to allow us to just think about, as those young people who see these skyscrapers. Actually, on the way here with Gretel, I've never seen a view of Liverpool Street like that. It's quite, how many years I've been in Liverpool Street, and even Gretel used to work in the city for many years. And just that view. And so it's new to me. A lot of our young people out in, especially in urban deprived areas, crime hotspots, are not getting what they really deserve. And it's really important that we just think about that. And that's why even in retirement, I'm still in public service. It doesn't switch off. It's in my DNA. So as a result of that, I am still working in the struggle for equality, fairness, and justice. ITV called me last week a social justice campaigner. I said, yes, I've arrived. I've moved on from being retired superintendent and author to a social justice campaigner. I'm putting it on my CV, not like I'm looking for work, but I thought it's really important that I realize, and we all realize, it doesn't stop. We have to collaborate. We've got to work with each other, especially in these challenging times, with the struggles all over. Sometimes they're quite insidious, with social media and other forms of platforms where people are being defined and being traumatized, even by the click of a mouse. So that's why I'm not chilling on a beach, to my wife's dismay. Yeah, she always says, when are we going to travel? When are we going to do that? I know, darling, it will happen. We try and squeeze some in, but to just fully retire, I'm not going to do that, because the struggle continues. I don't want our grandchildren to go through the same injustices and inequalities as our children's generation, our generation, our parents' generation. That's why it's personal. And I just don't want us to think this is the island of HSF. Think there is other islands out there. Some of you have to compete with, but some you don't. And some you may need to embrace and to see the world from their eyes. It might help you in how you work in the corporate law world. And I wouldn't want you to think that BEN is all things to all people. I think it's really important that they know their strengths, keep it focused on how everyone can gain and collaborate in a way that everyone knows where they fit in. And one of the reasons why I feel that's ongoing in me at the moment, I'm part of the Alliance for Police Accountability. It was set up only, it's formally launched last summer with Baroness Casey of the Casey Review, who looked into the death of Sarah Everard. And we launched where we have amazing collaborators, organizations from different disciplines, the Black Police Association, the Black Enterprise Organization. I know there's representatives from all of these organizations around the country. And we're not just being London-centric. We're trying to widen it, that we know that what we're going through in London, and we don't want to be in this island mentality that it's just London. Please, there's big, bad country all over the place. So we need to really ensure that we keep a wide focus in our learning and our understanding and how our relationships are and how we keep going when others think, oh, we've done that. I've seen too many times in the Met Police, in policing as a whole, they think they've ticked that box and that they take the pressure off the pedal and they allow things to slip. And that's why the Met Police are in special measures, because they've made things slip. Other force areas have been in special measures and get back, but the Met's been there for almost 2 years. And that shows, don't get into this arrogance of size because you've got this monopoly and you think you've got it all. I know that you wouldn't get into that, but it's easy done when you think you've got everything covered. So I just want to end by asking you to really sort of strengthen your resolve and not to be too proud. Pride, as they say in my reference book, comes before a fall. I know you can be really confident of who you are and what you do, but really understand that if you're too proud, things can go horribly wrong. You need to know that as an organization, corporate organization of HSF, and even BEN, you can really you can set the standard of so many organizations in not only the corporate law world, but wider, because we need beacons of hope. So I would want you, and listen to what I'm saying now, I want you to be dealers in hope. I used to arrest a lot of drug dealers, not very far from here, actually. But the things that I'm into now are dealers in hope. And the hope we bring for people, whether they are clients or not, whether they're people we want to work with, even the sibling rivalry between different organizations. Bring that sense of hope, because it's in short commodity for a lot of people. And if you give that real sense of understanding and belonging and embracing and in loving each other. I'm one of the few cops that talks about love. And it's because if you don't love yourself and others, how are you going to do the job you do? That's why I just can't understand why some police officers, they don't even love themselves, much less their colleagues or the public. So please be dealers in hope and love one another. Really. That's how it is. It's as simple as that. So if you're coming for big strategies and these really excellent 10-point plan, all I'm talking about is relationships, people. I'm only talking about how we get the best out of each other. And more importantly, challenge each other in a way that we need to be challenged, so that people tell you what you need to know and not what you like to hear. And on that note, I thank you for listening, and I believe there's time for questions and answers, but you can applaud me if you wish.
Thank you so much for that. I'm sure that's something we'll all think about, being beacons of hope. So we have some time for a question and answer session. So does anyone have any questions? I'll just run over to you with the mic.
Have I stunned them into silence?
Do you still think that the Met has a problem with institutional racism at the moment? And what, I guess, do you think they can do to improve relations with minorities across, I guess, London, if we look at what's happened with the Palestinian marches and other things that are happening with Black people as well?
Yep, I have said publicly that the Met is still institutionally racist, because we gave evidence clearly of what the issues are internally, when you're 5 times more likely to be investigated because you're Black, as a Black officer, than your white colleagues. Stop and search externally, you're 8 to 9 times more likely to be stopped if you're Black than you're white. All of these indices are still there. In fact, in a lot of ways, I believe the Met is more like a pre-Macpherson era, because we got culture change with Macpherson, with the recommendations and the independent oversight, but we still had some internal checks and balances to ensure that the culture is not more toxic. It's become a lot more toxic than I would ever think it was. Not only just Sarah Everard and Carrick and other sexual predators, but also for our young people. Just down the road, a young person, young girl at school, should be the safest place to be, got strip searched, an intimate strip search in a school, age 15. Can you believe how traumatizing that is? And when you think the school should be the safest place. So it's not just the police officers. I think the teachers have a lot to answer for in that respect. So all these things are showing me that they've got a long way to go. And even the commissioner himself won't even acknowledge institutional racism. In fact, it was so funny. I was at the memorial of Richard Taylor, Damilola Taylor's father, at Southwark Cathedral. And I said to the commissioner, would you like to come to our Alliance for Police Accountability conference we had a few days later, last Saturday? And he said, no, you're not constructive enough. And I had to take a second. That's not a very constructive thing to say, really. But anyway, so if you've got someone who's really got a filter, or has no filter, he just says what he wants, and he's not being held to account, and he won't even acknowledge institutional racism, sexism, misogyny. If you don't acknowledge it, you're not going to do something about it. So unfortunately, I believe they are.
Thanks so much. What made you stay? So I can understand why you decided to join, because you wanted to make that, but the strength to stay for that length of time and keep moving forward to make things more inclusive, it feels like that must have been a bit of a fight. So what kept you going?
It's a similar question Steve McQueen said to me. But he said it as well. What made you go in the first place? Because he said to me, Leroy, you loved your father, right? Yes, Steve. And your father was beaten up by police officers. Yes, Steve. So how could you join the ranks of the officers who beat up your father? And he really drilled me on this. And I made it clear to him that it's my faith. If I didn't have that sense of my calling that purpose, that vision, wanting to make changes from within, and also the support of Gretel and the family and Jesse Stevens, as I said, I don't think I would have really put myself through it. Because for the first 10 years, I was really questioning my sanity. I thought, why would I leave a great life in science? I enjoyed science, I still do, to then become a cop. But I also said to myself, I'm a black man who happens to be a cop, and not a cop who happens to be black. So I went in knowing that my beliefs and values had to be clear, consistent. I couldn't chip away at it. Because if I lost my principles or any sort of sense that I look in the mirror and that's not Leroy Logan, I would leave in a heartbeat. So having that determination, and as I said, I knew that we had to have a more effective organization, and we had to fight from within. And it was a struggle, it was a fight. We got all death threats and all sorts of things. But when you have that real sense of duty, you will do it. And I'm no extraordinary person. Brett will tell you that. I'm very flawed. Before you ever go at me. But no, it's as simple as that. I am not extraordinary, but I know my sense of purpose. And I said to myself, if I can get through the first 2 years, I can get through the next 28. And the reason why I said 2 years, you have a 2-year probation period. And I had the worst reporting sergeant in the world. In fact, his character was based in the film. It's worth watching the film just for that character. And but he made my life absolutely. I can't believe how he made. I put it down in a book, but I could have written a whole book just on him. And but I knew that if I could just get through him and show him and the other of the team that I can get through this, and I can be, feel comfortable in my own skin and be a good officer and a public servant and do the best I can, then I will push through. And don't get me wrong, I had my peaks and troughs, but I had to keep going. There was no doubt that, especially after we set up the BPA, and even when I was investigated, I used to get so many people saying, Mr. Logan, we're praying for you. We know how strong this is. We know the culture is chipping away at you and your colleagues. But don't give up. We understand why you're doing it, and we can identify with it. So I think when you know that, it just spurs you on. And before you know it, 30 years are gone. I've been retired 11 years, and it just feels like yesterday. But as I said, I'm not sitting back thinking, oh, everything's fine. My hands are on the plow. I am still pushing to see how I can help. And I've got a unique voice, because no one can gaslight me. No one can say, well, you don't know what the policing is like. Well, really? And that's, I think, my unique voice. So a social justice campaigner that can't be gaslighted.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Throughout your time in the force, did you have any supporters, anybody that you could lean on? It sounds like it was quite a lonely experience at times.
That young lady over there?
No, within the force.
Oh, within the force. Oh, yeah. I mean, the first few years was really tough. I didn't have anyone within the organisation. I had the community. I used to be criticised for being too close to the community. So they were my first allies. But as I went through a couple of ranks, and that's when we started to form the BPA, those sort of early 90s, we came together and started to collaborate in a way that it was a breath of fresh air. I thought, now I know why I'm here. And so one of the mentors for me was a guy called Ron Hope. He was one of the first black borough commanders in the country. And Ron was, he passed away a few years ago, and it's still a blessing to me even now. And he used to say something to me, Leroy, just don't take yourself seriously. And I remember, and when it really came out, it's in the book as well. I was national chair, and I felt undermined by even my colleagues. So this is just a warning. Sometimes your own can be your biggest challenge, but that's the human condition. It happens. And I remember coming from this meeting in Manchester, and I said, Gretel, I'm writing out my resignation, and I was just about to send it. I thought, let me call Ron. And I was talking him through this issue, and he said to me, and he started laughing. I said, Ron, this is not the time to laugh. And then he said, who are you writing this letter to? And I said, Home Secretary. Do you think he wants to know? Does he care? Does he really? This was Jack Straw at the time. He was Home Secretary. Don't take yourself that seriously, mate. Just get on and do what you got to do. Put your pride to one side and understand that, as my mother used to say, you have to take their licks. Sometimes you have to take the licks. So yeah, Ron was my closest friend, and he still is. He's always talking to me and telling me, just take your licks.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions, if anyone has any more questions. Otherwise, we can wrap things up here.
I want to hear from one of the men, because it's all been female so far, hasn't it?
Do we have any male
No
voices?
pressure. I allow myself to be sexist amongst the men. I'm not leaving until you ask me.
Perhaps they want to ask you questions directly. So I know you said you were happy to stay behind. Whilst we have more drinks, have more food. So please do stay at the end and ask any questions you have directly. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Dr. Leroy. You've been amazing, and thank you for your message to be a beacon of hope. Thank you very much.